So one of my favorite songs is the Nina Simone, Young, Gifted, and Black. That song is just one thing that just really carries me. And I remember when me and my dad went to the Common Hip Hop concert when he showed up at Music Hall. And I remember he did like a remix, obviously of that song. And I just think there is something about Black art, Black literature, and, Black artists who, created from a space of like consciousness in terms of African American history and their awareness as a Black American. It is so liberating. And so but I do think that a lot of times, growing up and having that awareness of like being young and gifted, I really did feel like there was a target on my back, and I think for a long time I was like hiding because of that, because I'm like, I really feel like there's a target on my back. And that really was the inspiration, honestly, for my first book, Seasons. Welcome back to the Renaissance Room podcast. And in today's episode, we're actually not going to be recording with the mic because the mic sound kind of crazy. But it's morning time. And so I'm just kind of coming on to encourage you guys to follow your gifts, follow your passions, do the things that you love. I've had so many times where I've deleted this podcast, like back and forth, but I kind of got to this point now where it feels a little steady. Like I think just being able to just like have an outlet to express myself and like be myself, I think that is so freeing, because I just don't really think that exists in many spaces. Like I seen someone upload a YouTube video and it was just talking about like certain products, but it was like products everybody uses. Like, why do we need this? And I just think that in a world where authenticity is truly dying, I enjoy my lane. I enjoy my avenue. And so it's like, I just encourage anybody else to kind of get in alignment with that and, flow with God and what it is that he's called you to do, because I think that there's so much peace in that. And I think there's so much freedom in that. It's so crazy how I really grew up not really being able to like express my thoughts, and I do wonder sometimes, like, is that because I am a woman? I do wonder, is that because I haven't really met like many intellectual peers? I always say I think geography has played like a huge role, but it's so interesting. Honestly, it really is. And so it's like this platform really gave me the opportunity to be able to sit and like express myself and have conversations that honestly I probably couldn't have with anybody else, because it just very seldom happens that way for me. And so I think, me being at this place in my life, I'm growing, I'm learning, I'm processing, I'm understanding. I kind of want to just share some things I've learned. One, I would say I've learned a lot about self-sabotage and how we talk about self-sabotage. I think for me, I'm going to say how it shows up for me. People say self-sabotage can show up in like procrastination. I would definitely say it showed up in procrastination in my life. And I think whenever you're embarking on something and you're doing something and it comes easy to you, or you may really be good at it, and when you're gifted, you're actually good at quite a few things, and so it's like, I do think that you kind of create this sense of drama, or you kind of like make yourself anxious and you feel like, I can't get this done, or I'm not going to get this done. And so you don't do it. But the crazy thing is like when you do it, you're like, wow, I really should have did this a lot sooner because this was so simple. And so I think for a lot of gifted people, I read this book. It's really good. It's called The Gifted Grown Up. And it just kind of talks about gifted adults and how we show up in the world, and, the ways in which we have our way of being and how we sabotage ourselves. A lot of times, they talk about gifted people, really not always having very successful careers, not always having success in their lives. Like a lot of times gifted people are like working as dishwashers and things like that. And the biggest thing I found, and this is why it's like, I always say, like, honestly, this is why it's like I have so much gratitude for my life, because it always has been through literature that I've been seeing. But it's like literature has such a powerful way of creating a world that is not there, right? It has such a powerful way of shining a light on something that is not yet been revealed, and I love that. And I love books, and I'm not talking about fiction books, because you guys know I don't read for fun, even though I've read some great fiction books. And quite frankly, anytime I actually pick up a fiction book, I can't put it down, because I just love it so much. And I'm just like, wow, this is so cool to be able to, imagine this. And I love, when I'm reading fiction books and I'm able to, conjure up these worlds, and I'm able to sit with the writer and I'm reading the text and I'm like, wow, that's so crazy. I can envision the genes, and you know what I mean? I love descriptive imagery. Like, it's so fun. But for me, I just read for educational purposes because I like learning. But, when I found the books like Gifted Grownups, and the other book, which I love, I actually need to finish it. It's called, The Gifted Adult, and it's called A Revolutionary. I'm going to pull it out of my bookshelf really quick. Hold on. Yeah, it's called A Revolutionary Guide for Liberating Everyday Genius. Now, you're probably thinking, you're probably not thinking, quite frankly, but if you are thinking, who are you to call yourself gifted? And, this is such a heavy thing to unpack. But when I look at my life and the experiences I've had, honestly, I'm so grateful. And it honestly almost brings me to like a point of tears, because I just feel like I've met so many gifted people who have been hospitalized, because to be gifted is to really think differently. The way you pick up on things, the way you process information, the way you assess things, you don't think like everybody else. And you truly are like that movie character who's like seeing the real world where everybody's not really seeing the real world. And when you're interacting with like, people who aren't gifted, they're looking at you like you're crazy, and they start to, diagnose you because they want to kind of not control you, but more so control what this is. And they don't understand it. And so they're like, oh, well, you're ADHD, or, oh, well, you have this type of mental illness. And I tell you guys all the time, like, I'm never going to be one to downplay mental illness. You know what I mean? That's not what I'm about. But, if that's something that's sensitive to you, I would click off this podcast episode, because, I'm not really talking about mental illness right now. I'm talking about giftedness. And I do think that a lot of times, giftedness is mistaken for mental illness, especially in regards to Black people. So, to be a Black woman, to be a Black man, right? To call yourself gifted is crazy. Like, you can be many things, but you can't be gifted. You can't be the big G's. You can't be gifted. You can't be godly. You can't be genius. You know what I mean? And in American society, Black people cannot be those things. And so, I say this to myself, is like, I sit where I am today and I just feel so blessed, because I'm like, wow, like I really found myself, and I found understanding of like who I am. And it's just been through my love of literature. But most importantly, I feel like God led me to those things. So, to be in this space in my life where I resonate with the behaviors and the attitudes of that. And it's like, I can say this is who I am, versus like the world constantly telling me that, oh, you have this mental illness, or, oh, you have that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just crazy. And I think that, again, like I said, to be a Black person is really hard, because it's like, you don't even get categorized for that. Like, we know giftedness is something that is understudied, under-researched, and a lot of times, like, there's not any gifted programs, for Black kids. But, it's so crazy. I actually met someone who just so happened to, and it's so crazy because I'm going to be working with this person, but it's so crazy. This is why I say it's so crazy. Like, God is so real. But I'm actually working with someone who actually works with gifted children. And so, yeah, I just think that is so timely. And so I always say for myself, like, I'm very blessed. And I say this a lot because I just think about my life, like, things could have been so different for me. So much of my life has come full circle to the point of like, I have understanding of like who I am and the world and why I do things the way that I do them. And, and I no longer shame myself or feel out of place, or like, like, I understand that I am gifted. And like, because I never grew up with a community of other gifted individuals, well, I did have a friend. He was also very gifted. But, a lot of the gifted people that I met had been hospitalized. They have been put on medication, and they were really living like, with the beliefs that, they were ill instead of actually being gifted. And they were African American, but it's like, it's crazy, and I always say this too. Like, I think that this is why I've always been really hesitant with sharing my gifts with the world and certain things like that, because I just think that the world does not appreciate giftedness, especially not in regards to African Americans, right? Like, we're in 20th century, right? 2024. And all we talk about is Albert Einstein. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's the only, like, when you think about American genius, American giftedness, it's Einstein, it's Elon Musk. Like, those are the only people who can operate in that space. But Kanye West being the Black man who has literally revolutionized the way we do design, period. This is not just he's revolutionized American design, period. This is not a matter of, oh, it's just fashion. No, It is American design. One man literally changed the entire world. He's literally revolutionized American design. We're never going back. Prior to Kanye, like study design prior to Kanye, what did it look like? You know what I mean? Post Kanye, I mean, you got every brand, every makeup marketing strategy, like everybody is on the wave of Kanye. You can't go nowhere without seeing Kanye's gift, you know what I mean? And what he's given us. And so I just think for me, it's like, to see Kanye West, be where he's in this space, right? Where, there is clearly, Black people can't be, like I told you, can't be those things, right? So he's struggling with that. You're also dealing with discrimination. You're also dealing with a lack of family, a lack of community, around people who can support your giftedness, because first of all, American society everybody needs to understand giftedness. I think that that's one thing that I think would really help a lot of educators. I think that would help a lot of parents. You need to study giftedness because your child might actually be gifted. The boy may not be slow. You know what I mean? Like he actually might be very gifted. And when you don't really have that, you don't have that understanding. This is why I always stress the importance of education. And this is what I'm going to be writing for. When you don't have that, then you're gonna miss something. And in the book, it talks about there's not many gifted people on the planet, but there's like 7 million of us. And we're in many different industries, but a lot of times it's undetected. And it's not just Black people, like it's white people as well. But it's just like when you think about American society in terms of its prioritization of studying giftedness, is rare. Like it's always really premising on IQ. And I know for me growing up having test anxiety, really being disinterested in some things, too, I want to say this because I think with giftedness, a lot of people don't realize that it's not you being like stellar in everything. You know what I mean? Like I'm gifted and I have some weak points. I guess some things that's just not going to click. You know what I mean? But there are a lot of things that do click, and there are a lot of things that I am good at and I am smart, but it's like I have weaknesses. I'm not good at everything. You know what I mean? I don't know everything. Like a lot of times gifted adults, we do have like a specialized area. And you kind of can see this too in football. Like I know we talk about football and I know I've wrote that piece, which in my defense, quite frankly, me shining light on the NFL's faulty allegiance to Black players was not to be like, oh, Black men and CTE. That wasn't really what it's giving. It really wasn't giving that. It was giving me shining light on the fact that, the NFL and what happened with that play with Damar Hamlin and everything that took place, there were so many journalists that were attacking the players and nobody really looked into the history of the NFL. And I started looking at just how, there's been so many deaths of Black players and things like that. And it's never really addressed and it's never acknowledged. Like that was the thing, you know what I mean? That was the thing. And I started just talking about industry baiters and how, this industry has some faults, you know what I mean? And I think that they owe Black players a lot more than what they give them is what I'm saying. That was all I was saying. But anyway, when you look at football, and I use football as an example because it's like one of the most prominent things. Everybody can relate to it. I mean, you get it. But yeah, it's, with football, it's like there are adults who are gifted in agility, right? Like there obviously has to be some type of, you know what I mean? I don't want to say metacognition, but there obviously has to be some type of connectedness in terms of how you can catch a football from miles away or how you can, you know what I mean? Because everybody can't do that. You know what I mean? Not everybody can do that well, And so it's there's different types of giftedness and people have their different rims of intelligence, you know what I mean? Like for me, it's words. For me, it's people, it's connections, you know what I mean? It's introspection. That's my, you know what I mean? That's my range, and also arts and creativity. But yeah, so it's it's different for everybody. I think fashion is another thing. I know that I have a friend who, I don't know if it's giftedness, but it's being able to really be in culinary, you know what I mean? And I think that this is the thing too, because I feel like Black people can be many things, but you can't be those big G's, right? That's what I talked about, in American society. We don't really sit with ourselves and question certain things. You don't ever think that it's just kind of strange that you're the only person who's really good at that. You know what I mean? You don't think that, and even in the ways in which you do things. And it's so crazy because growing up, that was me, right? When you read these books, you study giftedness, you find yourself within the pages. And it was me. I remember literally growing up, I was so frustrated in school, not because I couldn't learn, not because I didn't want to learn, not because I didn't understand it, but just because it was just so slow. I just felt like it was just so slow. And I found myself like that in training classes as well. Like, I hate when people spoon feed information to me. And, you know, I had a lot of trauma growing up too. Like, you know, I ain't gonna say trauma. Let me not be OD, but like, maybe little T. But no, seriously, there were some discriminatory experiences I had, you know, where it was like, I knew I was capable of something, and it was like, they wasn't going to let me do it because they felt like I, you know, was black and I couldn't, you know what I mean? So I needed to be on this level when I knew that you know what I mean? And so sometimes I think as black people, especially, you have to like fight your way through that. And this is why too, I'm going to end this podcast, but this is for all the parents out there. You have to understand with your child, you need to be proactive, okay? I know people are like, hey, we're going to do the homeschooling, and I'm with that. Like, 10 out of 10, I agree. You know what I mean? You should do that. But you have to understand that, like, you're probably not going to do that. You know what I mean? And it's not because you can't do that or you're not capable or you're not competent, but you have to understand, like, the realisms of life. Like, a lot of kids are going to be going to school, okay? So it's like, there are opportunities and resources if you would just put your best foot forward. Like, I looked into certain scholarships because you guys know, like, you don't know, but I got plans for my kids. And so I looked into certain things, certain programs and so forth. And it's like, these things cost money, but they actually have scholarships. They actually have, like, you know what I mean? And so it's just like, when you talk about the development of your child, right? That's all I'm saying is just talking about the development of your child, talking about the trajectory of your child's life. You have to be fully invested and fully committed, you know, if you really want your child to have like a successful life. And I think about so many opportunities and programs out there for young children that, you know, really go wasted because I think for so many Black people, Black communities, there's just a lack of education. You know, nobody really knows. Like, you know, you really have to be someone who's very resourceful. And I think because I didn't, you know, obviously I didn't grow up with a lot of responsibilities. I was able to kind of enjoy my youth. I didn't have children. I didn't marry young and things like that. And I'm not saying it like it was also choice. Like, maybe it was just my fate. I don't know. But it's like, I knew how I found myself so curious, right? Being gifted in that sense, but really acquiring knowledge and like finding resources. And the more you learn, obviously, the better off you will be because you know better. And like, you know, so I just think that overall, yeah, you really want to be fully invested because quite frankly, I think that that's where the biggest opportunities are. I think it's for the youth. Because once you get older, you know, people aren't really checking for like the 26-year-old. You know what I mean? At this point, it's like you're on your own. You know what I mean? Like, you have to figure out you have to carve your path at this point. But I think when you're younger, there are a lot of opportunities that can really help set your child up for success. And I think when you talk about like creative careers in terms of like giftedness, I do believe that that's something you really want to invest in very early on because one, it takes a lot of time and skill, right? Like, it takes time to really be able to write and cultivate. Like, I think about myself as a writer. You know, I haven't been writing that long, like 2018, 2017. But it's like, you know, here I am now, fast forward, and it's like I'm writing essays. You know what I mean? Like, I wasn't an essayist before. Like, I was just like, you know, kind of like a blogger. You know what I mean? But I think even in the development of like copywriting, even in the development of like being a cultural columnist, like all of it takes time. So I do think if you notice that your child is gifted in certain areas and they're good at certain things, you want to start early. So that way, you know, in their 20s, they can kind of reap the fruit of their labor. You know, there's nothing wrong with having a job and being in the workforce and things like that. But you just have to know if your child is gifted, a lot of that's going to go unrecognized. And the child may grow up not really knowing who they are. And they may, you know, really be underachiever, you know, and they may question themselves a lot, you know, because it's like, why do you think the way you think? And I think today, because, you know, psychological practices, not psychological practices, but you know, psychotherapy and things like that are so prominent and, you know, it's so lucrative and people are like, hey, how can we get this bag? Bring as many in as we can. You know, there's a lot of misdiagnoses because one, there's underrepresentation and there's understudy in African Americans, right? And then two, because everybody don't know everything. You know, I think that's the thing too, when people always say like at the end of the day, God has the final say. I believe in that. You know, it's like, okay, the doctor said this, but at the end of the day, God has the final say. And I think you have to understand too, like this isn't to dismiss medical practices, right? That's why I said this podcast episode isn't for anybody who is, you know, in that space because I'm not addressing that right now. But it's like, you have to understand that the Western psychology is built on a lot of different things. Okay. You talk about the foundation, you could talk about the study and the research and how it really only studies European cultures, right? People of white people, essentially European descent. So it doesn't really study, like, outside of medical apartheid, you know what I mean? It doesn't really have any context for African Americans. And I was looking at, Black sociologists. There was a guy who was at NYU. He was talking about something in regards to like Black youth. I can't remember. I actually favored it on my bookmark because I low-key wanted to send him an email, but I'm like, we're going to wait. But he just pretty much talked about how, there's Black research programs are understudied, right? I mean, underfunded. And there's actually not a lot of Black researchers who can contribute to this space. And this is why I always say too, like, if you are someone who has a gift, please go out in the world and use your gift. Please go out in the world and help us. You know what I mean? Because it's not always discrimination. It's not always racism. It's not always, a lack of opportunities that are up against us, but it's more so like, we don't know who we are. We don't know what we're capable of. We don't know what we can do and how we contribute to the world, so it's different for everybody. Like I said, everybody has their own thing. Okay. I'm gifted in multiple areas. I do my thing. You know what I mean? I do think at this place in my life, and even as I continue to work my hand and work my gift, I do believe by the grace of God, it'll all come together. And that's my plan. I'm working actively towards that. But you got to get on the road, so I do think if you want to help your community, if you want to help your people, you have to get on the road. Please get on the road. Like that's the thing. Get on the road, help your children, be attentive. And so, yeah, I think, when you grow up in the hood, I say this all the time, you don't think that there's you don't know what's out there for you. You know what I mean? You have no idea because your horizon is, you know what I mean? You can't see beyond the ghettos. You can't see beyond what's in front of you. So I think this is why it's so important to speak life into your children. I think it's why it's so important to speak life into Black children, Black youth, anybody really growing up in the ghetto. And I think it's so important to study and learn. I believe in that. I'm always going to teach that. Like, education is so empowering. The more you know, the better off you'll be in life, because it just helps you make really good decisions. And it's funny too, when you're gifted, you kind of sometimes look at the world and think everybody knows what you know and everybody thinks the way you think. And I think that's the thing that's most interesting about the giftedness, right? Being gifted is like you think everybody thinks like you, so you kind of you don't shortchange yourself, but you don't see yourself as gifted. You don't see yourself as unique because you're like, oh, I thought everybody could do that. It's not true. You know what I mean? Everybody can't do that, And so, yeah. And a lot of times just know that, there's a lot of things that are up against giftedness, right? And there's other barriers that you have to break down in terms of like giftedness and intelligence, especially from American society's educational system, right? It's always based on IQ. It's never really based on innate ability. And even still, it's understudied, right? Especially in regards to Black community. So you might be gifted. You might want to go read a couple books on that, study up on that. You're not going to find much, but you'll know if you know. When the dots start clicking and things start clicking, then you'll know. And I think if you're not gifted, that doesn't mean that you're X, Y, and Z. Do I think gifted people have been touched by God? I mean, you can take it however you want to take it. I wouldn't say that we are just like superheroes or anything like that, but I do think that there is really something said about the gifted individual. I really do believe that. And so this is more so just a pod for the gifted. Uplifting the gifted, shining light on those who are Black and gifted, more specifically, because it is understudied. And we are, we can, like I said, in American society, I'm gonna close with this. Unfortunately, we're up against a lot of things. We can't be the 3 Gs. We can't be godly. You know what I mean? We can't be genius, and we can't be gifted. So it's like you have to understand what we're up against. And this is why I always tell you guys too. Like, I think I talked about this in a previous episode. Like being careful with your spiritual journey, because it's like, a lot of people come into spirituality and they start thinking that everybody is good. They start thinking that everybody is on their side. They start thinking that they can supersede and surpass, certain, institutions that have been built and founded on racial discrimination and racism. Like, that's not how that works. You know what I mean? And I think that leads a lot of people into like, I don't know, you start conjuring up different things, so it's like we're still in the world, unfortunately, but I do believe that with God, all things are possible. So that's just me shining some light on the giftedness. I hope that this sound was a little bit better, because that other sound quality with that mic was trash. I'm so sorry. Peace.